Because you already found out. What's the one thing you'll not F around with? Just because you climbed up something doesn't mean you can climb down. A few weeks ago, I drove up Pikes Peak. I had woken up that morning in Pittsburgh, flew to Denver work trip, drove down to Colorado Springs. I had a few hours before hotel check-in and was like, last time I was here, Pikes Peak was snowed in, now it's the summer, so I should check it out. I was not the least bit prepared or acclimated to the elevation, and in the past I would have problems adjusting to the elevation, so I knew I was tempting fate, but did it anyway. When I got to the top, the elevation hit me hard. I had a splitting headache, would get winded from a few steps, was seeing spots and felt like I was going to pass out. And then I realized, I'm in no condition to drive back down. The path down is 15 miles of steep hairpin curves and only the occasional guardrail. It's bad enough that you have to engine brake on the way down or your brakes will overheat and fail. I so got a giant bottle of water and started hydrating like I was about the hike across Death Valley. I sat in the car, drinking water and resting, trying to nap over the headache. After about 45 minutes, I was feeling a little more alert and responsive and started the trek down the mountain very carefully, taking occasional stops to get recomposed. After about a mile back down the road, I had dropped about 1,000 feet in elevation, and I felt 100% better. In fact, I felt great for the rest of the trip. Instead of slowly adjusting to the elevation, I just got all the suffering done at once. For future reference, there's a train in Manitou Springs to the top of the peak so you don't have to drive yourself. I wish I had known. Inverted storm surge. This happens as a hurricane approaches a coastline. If you search, you'll find pictures of people walking around in shallow, empty stretches of beach. The storm gets close enough and the low pressure within the eye basically sucks up millions of gallons, pulling it away from shore. It can go for miles sometimes, depending on the strength. Anyway, that water comes back. With prejudice. I grew up on the Alabama Gulf Coast. Walked down to the beach as a hurricane was approaching. I was in middle school and had no idea you couldn't see a hurricane the same way you can a tornado. Anyway, the beach was drained entirely. Not knowing any better, I walked out to the end of the public fishing pier that would normally be about 8 to 9 feet deep. A few minutes passed, I was satisfied with this excursion, so I turned around. About 2/3 RDs of the way back to the shore, I felt the ground rumble, and I instinctively hauled ass as fast as I could. I'd say I finally got to about 20 feet from a jetty, rocks piled up to mitigate erosion, and got hit from behind by a wall of water. It actually carried me up and onto the very top of the jetty and slammed me down. I could feel that my sandals left my feet, and by pure luck, they floated up and gently settled right by my hands where I was holding on to the rocks. The water receded slightly, enough for me to get over the jetty and away from the beach. I was so embarrassed that I never told my mom about it and snuck into my house to get a shower and changed. Fast forward to 2017 when I was living on the Florida Gulf Coast. A bunch of people walked down into Tampa Bay right as Hurricane Irma was rolling in. I legit got anxiety watching the footage from the local TV station. Needless to say, I've never gone anywhere near the water ahead of a hurricane again. Weathermen. Heard one on TV say, "If you're within the sound of my voice, get to your tornado place now." I was a little jaded due to the many times I'd heard this before. Still, I told my son to get in the hallway, then went outside to get our beagles, and I saw the fucking thing. A 400 meters wide F4 coming down our road. I got in the hallway with just a couple big couch cushions, pulled my son into my lap, hunched over him, and held the pillows over us. He was unhurt. I had a dislocated shoulder with torn ligaments, tendons and muscle, splintered ball, torn rotator cuff, and so on. I was in so much pain from that once all the pieces stopped moving that I didn't even realize I had hundreds of pieces of rock, splinters, and glass embedded in my skin, mainly in my back. Or not a single thing even scratched my son. Had I gotten moving the moment he said that on the TV, we would have been sandwiched between two mattresses. We lived, both of us, both dogs, and our cat. It seems like we were all huddled under those two cushions. One of the dogs had a single glass shard in his back left side. It fell out when he started walking. Me, I had pieces of stuff being pushed out of my skin for the next month. The house, nothing much left. Of a $290,000 house, it took $273,000 to rebuild it. The foundation and much of the framing were okay. Edit, this was the Enterprise, Alabama tornado on March 1st, 2007. There were 8 students killed at the high school and one elderly woman just down the road from the school. 50 plus were injured from this in the area. Our daughter was at the school. It took 4 to 5 hours to find her. She was badly traumatized from the experience, but luckily, only light injuries. This experience affected our family mentally for years, if not a lifetime. There are so many others who are as well. We did not have a shelter and did not put one in. Basements are not common for that area. I was stationed at FT Rucker with 2 years to go until retirement. Tornadoes of that kind were not common to that area of the U.S. With climate change, they are now. Insurance paid for most of the repairs and replacement of our house and stuff. Non-recoverable depreciation took a big chunk out of our savings, though. This is something so few people realize will financially affect them in a large loss like this. We currently live in Florida. We've been through a few hurricanes turned tropical storms, but not a direct hit. We care for my mother-in-law, who is 83 and has dementia. Once she passes, we are moving, likely to Tennessee near our daughter. I would take a tornado over a hurricane. We were 18 miles west of the damage path of Hurricane Michael. What we saw of the damage from that during recovery efforts was staggering. I have been to war in the Middle East. While those experiences helped me process that one, the sheer destruction visited upon Florida was mind-numbing. 2 years ago, we spent 8 hours in a strong tropical storm with 70 miles per hour winds and gusts to 90. The tornado lasted less than 2 minutes from when I first saw it to when I was stepping outside to survey the area. Except for the minor intrusion of water from our pool, we didn't have a single bit of flooding from the tornado. With my combat experience, very little scares me these days. There was surprisingly little fear during the tornado considering. Most of it came after while trying to find our daughter. That tropical storm, the length of time, the wind, and the amount of rain. That was scary. My injuries were more extensive than just the shoulder and cuts bruises. Due to a TBI from an explosion in Iraq, I suffered a secondary TBI from the tornado as well. My shoulder was put back in place by EMTs in the area, and surgery didn't happen until after we moved back in. Too much to do. The TBI wasn't recognized or treated until after we had moved back in. Honestly, I knew I had another TBI, but my family needed me to be strong for them, especially our kids. Once things settled down, I started getting regular headaches. Next thing you know, I'm at the Shepherd Center in Atlanta for 4 months and also 2 months of hyperbaric treatments in New Orleans. We are all doing well these days. When we are all together, we often talk about that day. It is as much a part of our family history as any other significant event. GHB. No hangover. Makes you more social. Like booze, but better. Like Molly, but better. No calories. You feel great about yourself. You are more empathetic. You can score it for super cheap. You never have to feel bad again. You can use it to manage your sleep. You can use it to manage everything you don't like. You can do it every day and feel great. You can use it to sleep because you can't anymore because you're so addicted. You can use it 24/7 so that you don't go into DTs. You can use it after you have a seizure from doing it so much. You can use it to forget about that fact that you ended up in a hospital because of it. You can use it to forget about that fact that no one wants to hang out with you anymore because you're high-key crazy and out of control. You can use it to try to end your life because you ruined it by doing G constantly. You can detox and have the worst few weeks of your life and still crave it. You can spend 4 years in treatment and recovery and have to completely rebuild your life from scratch and still crave it all these years later. You can go through your life sober for years, but knowing that if you ever have another drop of it, you will binge until you're very shortly thereafter dead. Are we still having fun? Appendixes. My mother thought it was just stomach cramps. She holed herself up for days until finally my dad begged her to go to the doctor. They told her if she hadn't listened to him and waited one more day, it could have killed her. A year or so later, mine burst while stretching, so I thought it was just a pulled muscle. I waited over a week before going to the ER. They said the only reason I didn't die was because by some miraculous event that they had never witnessed before. My body sent a swarm of white blood cells to form a ball around the pus. I should have been dead, and I was only 13 years old. It's a lot easier to get lost in the woods than you think. I wandered away from our campsite a little tipsy because I love looking for mushrooms. I kept going in just a little further until one time, when I looked back, I couldn't see my wife and friend back at the site. A few big steps to the left to reorient myself. Wait, maybe a few steps over in this direction. Oh, sht. I yelled for help, but the sound doesn't carry. The sun was just setting when I went in, but it gets dark a lot faster in the thick of the forest. I panicked. I ran. I cursed at myself. I yelled for help over and over. I tried to stay calm, but also decided to keep moving because it was getting dark and cold, and I knew I was in very deep shit if I didn't get out before. Nightfall. I spent about an hour and a half totally lost, the longest 90 minutes of my life. Finally, I heard a truck rumbling in the distance and sprinted towards it. I almost cried when I saw the clearing and popped out on a gravel road 3 kilometers west of our campsite. Looking at a map after, had I gone any other direction, it was just forest with no end in sight. My wife and friend said they went into the forest yelling my name. Of course, I was probably too far at that point and heard nothing. I don't know what would have happened if that truck hadn't been going for a late evening drive along the service road. I thought I was going to die. Cyanide. If you mix potassium cyanide with an acid, you will see bubbles and smell almonds. I smelt the almonds. For more context, this was during a summer job at a chemical company when I was a student. I was measuring the viscosity of all of their chemicals, and once finished, I discarded the various chemicals into a beaker. I failed to read the warning labels. One said, "Danger, potassium cyanide, do not mix with acids." Another said, "Danger, strong acid." I merrily mixed the two together and remember hearing a sort of spritz sound as the liquid bubbled, followed by the smell of almonds. I was in a large industrial building with a massive door open, so I rushed outside and spent 5 minutes wondering if I was going to die. I didn't. I also didn't mention the incident to anyone at the company. Born into it, but keeping your head brain safe. I was born with such severe brain damage that it causes spontaneous paralysis and movement. You ever have that nightmare? The one where you're trying to move, every bit of focus is on moving, but you can't. Welcome to my life. And I wasn't kidding about spontaneous. I've fallen downstairs, dropped things, hit walls and whatnot. Currently, my right knuckles are scraped because my brain thought slamming my hand into the corner of the sink was a great idea. We learned only one time what happens if you give me boiling water. Even not being able to make spaghetti is annoying. You will be perpetually covered in wounds, bruises. Oh, and you're going to be sexually assaulted. That's going to happen a lot. People will in fact see you as a public sex toy because you can't move. And the police will agree. If you didn't want that guy to stick his hand in your underwear, why didn't you move? You won't be able to leave the house for days, even weeks. Jobs will not want you. And the ones that will treat you like you're some subhuman animal. A lot of people will treat you that way. I have a decent situation down job now, but I've still had problems. People don't like the me not responding, the spasms. Some will understand, many will not. You're fully conscious, by the way. When the paralysis kicks in, you can still feel pain, but it doesn't override it. I was born this way, freak accident really. But wear protection. I don't care how uncomfortable it is. You know what else is uncomfortable? Needing to go to the bathroom, but your legs won't let you get up. Or slamming your head into the table when you fall down. Wear your goddamn seatbelt and helmets. Be sure to ventilate rooms when working with chemicals. All that. I am what you'll become, and it ain't a fun ride. I had an extremely close friend for years, and they were always so nice to me, went above and beyond all the time, and I felt so appreciated and loved as a friend. This was years, mind you, too. One thing that was red flag that I ignored and I mentioned to my partner that was concerning was that this friend was really horrible to people they didn't like or felt somehow wronged or slighted. I remember saying, I just need to make sure I'm never in their bad side. Well, long story short, always judge someone's character to include how they treat people even if they don't necessarily like them. If they talk badly, spread rumors, etc. about others, they will likely at some time do it to you. Edit to add. I also co-owned a business with this best friend, and so my second advice would be, don't ever go into business with a friend. Even if they have no red flags, don't do it. Pit bulls. My family has always had and loved dogs. Thought the breed was fine and just got a bad rep. My dad brought a puppy home. We had her for 6 years. Loved her, house-trained, no behavior issues, we thought. Came home one day and she had killed our old boxer, who had been with her every day that we had her, and also was so old she had no teeth, and was chewing on her severed leg like a chicken bone. Never again. And it makes me want to puke when people have their children crawling around with these dogs. Going too far in a very shallow sea area by the beach, especially if the beach has wet sand far into the land. When I was about 13, 165 centimeters or 5 feet 5 inches tall at the time, I went to the beach with my dad. It was a small cove by the Atlantic. The water was super shallow. I went like 100 meters, 330 feet in, and it was still at knee level. Then the tide came. When the water got colder and came to my mid-thigh, I decided to head back. Before I had even crossed a quarter of the distance, the water was at my neck level and rising, waves crashing over my head. Each wave dragging me back into the sea with immense force as it receded. The tide also submerged about a third of the beach itself, making the way back even longer. My dad pulled me out, but it was scary as hell. I couldn't believe how quickly everything happened. I had nightmares about the sea rising and pulling me in for almost the next 10 years. They're gone now. My dad rushed to me way before the waves started crashing over my head. He had been keeping an eye on me and had waved me over, but when the water came up close to my torso, he realized I wasn't going to be fast enough and went in. By the time he reached me, the situation was as described. I was not drowning yet, but I could barely reach the sandbed with my toes while keeping my head above sea level and had no way to continue forward. Pigeons or any birds nesting on or in your house. Had some pigeons living in my kitchen fan duct, the outside wall end, never thought much of it. 11 months of agony followed. Being bitten by mysterious invisible insects at night, during the evening, itching when having dinner, pinpricks halfway the night, shining lights at your legs, not seeing anything. You think you're going insane, but your partner also has it. We sprayed the whole house multiple times with pesticides, wiped the floors with permethrin. Afraid to bring the bugs to others, we stopped visiting people. Spent most of our day outside. Wiped ourselves down with essential oil creams to have some sleep. Reapply halfway the night. Made calls to all kinds of pest centers, institutes, and specialists. They all said I was imagining things or had fleas. In the end, I gave up the apartment and decided to sleep at a friend for a while, but needed to clean myself and change clothing. Bought secondhand clothes and found an abandoned garden that only had cats in it. I stripped down naked, threw my old clothes away, felt something itching on my legs, looked down, and saw hundreds of fleas jumping up my legs. I sprayed them down with the 99% alcohol I had with me to kill whatever I had at home. Frustrated, I panicked away from that area, my clothes half put. Goddarn cats were infested with fleas. The whole area was. My luck. In my friend's place, I still had midnight itches, thought it was psychological. She had nothing, sprayed my bedding and myself with alcohol daily. Tried to relax. One day, her black cat, sitting on my lap in the hot Spanish sun, scratched herself behind her ear. A bird mite walked over her head to my arm. I couldn't believe it. Finally, proof. I am not insane. I caught it, made macro photos, sent them to the same experts that in the past had told me I was perhaps going crazy. Ah, yes, that does look like a bird mite, which I was thinking and telling people for a year. Lesson learned, if you have birds nesting in or on your house, they are not cute. Bird mites will haunt you for years. Nightmare stuff, get rid of the nest and spray everything down with pure alcohol. Edit, so pigeons pick up bird mites, often resistant to common pesticides, from chicken farms nearby. They then nest in or near homes, balconies, ledges, roofs, attics, etc. When the young chicks fly out, hundreds or thousands of bird mites in their larval stage, transparent, minute, invisible to the human eye mostly, are trapped in the nest area, super hungry. They will spread out looking for a warm body to feed on. They, however, cannot fully or efficiently survive on human blood, and hence will be stuck in their larval stage for a long time at least, unclear data on this. They remain invisible and haunt you until they die, unsure when, or grow into adults, which will consequently haunt you again. A lot of diluted information on this subject exists, but do some Googling and nightmare, horror stories far worse than mine will pop up. People unaliving themselves, losing their jobs, their homes, their health. Bison. I worked at a large animal university hospital, had handled rank stallions, hot off the track thoroughbreds, bulls, protective mama cows, and straining heifers, or even llamas and other camelids. The animal that almost killed me was an 800 lb bison heifer that was entirely unhandled. When she threw herself down in the head gate, the jagoff at the gate panicked and released that animal while I was in the stall. Thankfully, I levitated to the top of the 6 feet cinder blocks and didn't get killed. 800 lbs of mass should not move with the dexterity and speed that effing thing displayed. It was like a bison skin on a cat model. That's when I learned 2 things. Exactly the difference between domestic versus truly wild. And 2, F bison. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to see more.